Now we will explain about the ISO. There are 4 ISO ecolabelling, namely ISO 14020, ISO 14021, ISO 14024, and ISO 14025. This video explains a little bit about ISO standards related to ecolabelling. The content that will be explained in this video is related to the introduction to ISO, explanation to ISO ecolabelling, as well as conclusions. Before that, let's look back at part 1 about the introduction to ecolabelling. The previous video explains about the definition and history of eco-label labeling. To some extent, the eco-label is also known as the green label, as well as the first eco-label created in 1978 by the German Federal Minister of the Interior. Okay, let's start about ISO. What is ISO? ISO stands for the International Organization for Standardization. The International Organization for Standardization is a worldwide federation of national standards bodies that are ISO member bodies. The work of preparing international standards is normally carried out through ISO technical committees. Besides, international organizations, governmental and non-governmental, in liaison with ISO, also take part in the work. ISO collaborates closely with the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC, on all matters of electrotechnical standardization. International standards are drafted in accordance with the rules given in the ISO/IEC directives, Part 3. Let's move to introduction of ISO 14020. ISO 14020 is a standard that provides information about a product or service in terms of its overall environmental characteristics, emphasizing specific environmental aspects or any related aspects. In ISO 14020 there is an affirmed principle. In general, all the principles asserted can be applied to all environmental labels and declarations. There are 8 principles in place that outlines the standards that must be followed to guarantee that accurate and reliable information is provided. These principles are intended for businesses that want to create labels or environmental claims. The first principle emphasized is environmental labels and declarations shall be accurate, verifiable, relevant, and not misleading. The second principle is that procedures and requirements for environmental labels and declarations should not create unnecessary barriers to international trade. The third principle is that environmental labels and declarations are based on a comprehensive scientific methodology to produce accurate and reproducible results. The fourth principle is information on procedures, methodologies, and criteria used to support environmental labels declarations also provided to stakeholders. The fifth principle is to take all aspects in the development of environmental labels. The sixth principle is that environmental labels and declarations should not preclude innovations that have the potential to improve environmental performance. The seventh principle is that the process of developing an environmental label involves open consultation and participation with interested parties. Lastly is administrative requirements or requests for information related to environmental labels and declarations should be limited to establish compliance with applicable criteria and standards. Now, we are going to look at ISO 14021. ISO 14021 created a need for environmental labeling standards which apply to all relevant aspects of the life cycle of the product developed. The manufacturers, importers, distributors, retailers, or anyone else who may benefit may make such self-declared environmental claims. The Type 2 ecolabel is specially for products and services where there are neither criteria nor labeling schemes. It can give credibility to environmental claims made by manufacturers, marketers, and resellers for products or services. Furthermore, ISO 14021 helps in avoiding confusion, barriers to trade, and unfair competition. Secondly, it helps identifies and defines a number of widely used claim terms. And lastly, it outlines each term's evaluation techniques in order to guarantee that they are both legitimate and scientifically sound. The next ISO we are going to look at is the ISO 14024. This ISO establishes the principles and procedures for developing Type 1 environmental labeling programs. It includes the selection of product categories, product environmental criteria and product function characteristics, and for assessing and demonstrating compliance. ISO 14024 is the Type 1 environmental labeling. This ISO is the eco-labeling schemes where there are clearly defined criteria for products. These systems give items or services a mark or logo if they meet a set of standards. In this ISO principles and procedure, it listed the selection of product categories, product environmental criteria, product function characteristics, and for assessing and demonstrating compliance. It specifies the labeling process for certification. Lastly, we are going to look at ISO 14025. ISO 14025 aims to present environmental information about the products accurately and clearly based on its life cycle stages. It also ensures that the life cycle assessment, LCA, and environmental product declaration, EPD, calculations are consistent, such that the completed EPDs are similar across sectors. ISO 14025 is the Type 3 environmental declarations. It is for specific aspects of products using a life cycle approach, and it establishes the concepts and methods for producing data. The declarations allow comparisons between comparable items by displaying quantitative environmental information about a product's life cycle, which it is useful in business-to-business communications in fulfilling regulatory requirements. In conclusion, through this video we learn that each ISO has its own details related to Ecolabel, but puts environmental principles as a priority. ISO is important as it is created as environmental management guidelines to assist organizations in taking a proactive approach to overcome environmental challenges. Thank you for listening. And wait for next video. Before we move to next video, let's join the simple quiz together. We have 2 true and false questions. First question. Type 3 environment declaration is eco-labeling schemes where there are clearly defined criteria for products. True or false? The answer is false. Second question. Is it correct the group of experts in the Technical Committee, TC, that develops ISO standards? True or false? The answer is true. Great job, guys. See you in the next video. Bye.